How a Romance Novel Saved the Galaxy by Ariana de Rolte. Chapter 71. Plo Koon 7, Obi-Wan 5. Plo had been ready to head back to the mines after floating the injured children to the camp, but the Force told him to wait. News came minutes later that Obi-Wan and the last of the missing children had been found, leaving him and Faye free to stay with the rescued children. There had been some tearful reunions of new Mandalorian parents and guardians with their missing kids, but it was becoming clear that many of them didn't have parents to return to. In fact, there were over a dozen who weren't on the list he had from the new Mandalorians. Faye had been moving among them, gently asking questions and providing solid answers to the anxious children's questions. Plo had some of the younger ones by his side where he sat on the ground and was explaining what the adults around them were doing. He was relieved that Helia's 8-year-old friend was among them, since younger children had been treated particularly harshly by Death Watch. He felt a surge of anger at the thought and reminded himself that the mission had been an overall success and the children could now heal. 2 children had died in the explosion in the mine. They'd been too close to the bomb's center to survive, but it was likely all those who were injured would make it. Plo and Faye had gotten them to medics and backed up very quickly, all things considered. The non-New Mandalorian children are from a variety of planets along the Perlemian route, said Faye to his head. Death Watch had been much more active than we were aware. That was concerning news. Master Jedi, would you be able to answer a question for me? The asker was a teenage girl from Sundari's Royal Academy named Silvara. She, along with many of the other teens from the Academy, had been off watching the chanting at the front of the Mandalorian forces.
So long as the little ones don't mind.
It was said teasingly, but the frantic headshakes and tightening of little hands on his robes showed the nuance hadn't gotten through his respirator. Alas. Silvara was a perceptive one. She sat down at the edge of their little crowd before asking a question. Thank you. Watching the chanting was the first time I felt proud to be a Mandalorian, rather than ashamed of our violent past. It was probably a good thing that none of the true Mandalorians were in hearing range, since they were all at the battle besides the medics. I felt it in my heart that I needed to join the fight, and while I'm worried... She trailed off, all her earlier eloquence exhausted.
Worried you will crave violence?
Asked Plo. She nodded eagerly. What if that is all Mandalorians can do?
Did you crave violence, or did you wish to fight?
Is there a difference?
There is,
said Plo decisively.
There are many beings in this galaxy who I would consider fighters, warriors even, but they do not fight with violence. Lawyers, writers, and diplomats fighting their battles with words. Peaceful protesters arguing for the rights and protection of all beings. Doctors and teachers fighting to heal and educate. Every time someone stands up and protests the mistreatment of other beings, it is a battle. Some of those battles end in violence no matter what we do, but it doesn't mean they shouldn't be fought.
Plo would like to think that anyone would step up for the injustices of the galaxy, but the reality was most would not. The existence of slavery across the galaxy would sad prove of this. I never thought of it that way before, admitted Silvara. But what if Mandalorians are different and we can't escape the violence in our blood? Much like the young Satine Kryz, she sounded like she was quoting someone. The new Mandalorian misinformation campaign had a lot to answer for.
My understanding of Mandalorians is most of you aren't even related by blood. I have heard the phrase, family is more than blood, several times while in the system.
Though alarmingly often as a form of flirting when it was said near him.
To be Mandalorian is a cultural choice. I would suggest talking to some of the true Mandalorians to get their views on what it means to be Mandalorian.
Silvara nodded. I will do that, Master Jedi. Thank you for your time. She rejoined her friends, immediately starting what appeared to be a vigorous debate. It was going to be interesting to see how new Mandalorian culture changed now that the corruption at the top had been rooted out. Obi-Wan could still feel a lingering flush of embarrassment and anger at how Vizsla twisted what he did on Mandalore. I'm sorry I used the Force to grab the Darksaber and send it back to the Mandalore, Master Windu. They were all walking back to the Mandalorian camp and the medics. Master Windu had been deep in thought. I suspect Vizsla would have cheated no matter what, and it was obvious the Mandalore didn't mind. Besides, you were right that the Force required us to be there, so you could inform them about the hidden hangar. That was the only reason we didn't go straight to the medics, Padawan. Something inside of him eased at the word Padawan. So did his burst squeeze on his shoulder at the word. He'd been delighted as Obi-Wan to find out that Master Windu had chosen him while his boar was unconscious. The area between the platform and the ships was all torn up from hundreds of Mandalorians crossing over it and performing battle chants in their heavy armor. Their legs were covered in dust by the time they reached the medics. The closest medics waved them towards the back.
"They're probably keeping themselves free for injured from the battle,"
suggested Master Windu, sensing their confusion. Behind them, there were the faint sounds of blaster fire and ion engines in the atmosphere. The medic with them nodded. "Triage rules. You're all walking and aren't in life-threatening condition, so we'll head to the back. Not sure if the new Mandalorian medics would know how to treat battle wounds anyway."
Holdan snorted. "That's not going to stop the wounded from using them, not with all the Ade gathered there."
Sure enough, there were true Mandalorians being treated when they got there, barely paying any attention to the medics while they watched the children. "Master Plo!" Obi-Wan was so relieved to see him.
"Obi-Wan,"
said Plo in his deep voice. There were two kids clinging to his robes, just like Obi-Wan had years ago whenever Plo visited the crush.
"It's good to see you safe."
Faye waved and sent the same sentiment toward their bond. She was busy talking to the teens, which made up the first rank several meters away. "Zare, Yara!" Two adults rushed out of the crowd near the ships, one of them pulling Zare into a hug, while the other reached for Yora. "Mom? Mom? You're both here?" Yora sounded a bit dazed. "Of course we are!" Tears were streaming down their faces. "But your jobs!" protested Zare. "No job is more important than you two," said one of the women. "Come on, let's get you seen by a medic." The twins looked to Corinth for permission first, which he gave with a nod. Corinth scanned the crowd, then sighed. "I were from one of the good schools, so it's no surprise that Burry showed up," he muttered to Morrow. "Yeah, my parents didn't actually have a problem with me becoming a boy, but heaven forbid I refused to get my skin bleached at the same time," said Morrow. "No one is coming for us."
"What about Monia?"
asked Obi-Wan. She was staring blankly at the scene. "She's not New Mandalorian. Can't remember the name of the planet she said she was from, when she used to talk," said Corinth.
Master Plo nodded. "There are many here who aren't New Mandalorian. We'll be informing the Mandalore once the battle ends. Before then, though, you must all get checked by the medics, especially you, young man."
He was talking to Maru. The splint on his hand had broken at some point during their escape.
Obi-Wan,
prompted Master Windu and Holdan at the same time. The adults shared a smile. Obi-Wan sighed. He hated the scolding he got from the healers at the temple whenever he got injured, and usually tended the wounds himself whenever possible. So far, the Mandalorian medics hadn't followed the same pattern, but the new Mandalorian medics might be different. Nevertheless, he dutifully headed to the nearest free medic. Corinth and Maru did the same. Obi-Wan stood still while they ran the scanner over him. They looked older and wore a white coat like some doctors in Hollywood. "You're his guardians?" they asked Master Windu and Holdan.
"I'm his boar, and this is his Jedi Master,"
said Holdan proudly. Obi-Wan knocked his head. "He has cracked ribs and bruises across his chest. There are also multiple bruises and cuts across the rest of him, including that one on his face. I'm prescribing Bacta for the cuts and bruises. The ribs will have to heal on their own, but I will provide a painkiller. You will have to refrain from physical activities for the next several days and should be checked regularly."
"Thank you, Doctor,"
said Master Windu. "I can teach you a healing trance if your master doesn't mind," said Master Faye, coming up beside them. She gave Holdan a hug, then paused. "And I'll heal that concussion of yours as well," she said to his boar.
"My skills don't lie in healing,"
said Master Windu modestly.
"I would appreciate the assistance with my Padawan, Master Faye."
Master Windu inclined his head towards Faye. "Please call me Faye."
"Oh, Mace, then,"
he said with a smile. She studied Master Windu. "Aren't you Trasa's Grand Padawan?"
"I am."
"Well, she is my Grand Padawan, so you've entered my lineage, Obi-Wan. Yoda is going to love that." Obi-Wan suspected by her smirk that it was the opposite.
"Let's get the Bacta on you so we can form a bond,"
suggested Master Windu. He flashed a smile at Master Faye.
"Then your great-great-great-grandmaster can teach you some healing."
She laughed. "You are so solemn and counsel-mazed. It's good to see you smile, even if it's at your poor Grandmaster's expense. Please just call me Grandmaster, Obi-Wan."
"Yes, Grandmaster."